Welcome to this session. We are going to get some hands-on examples on what universities are doing to help students and scholars with a refugee experience settling in their new countries. We have 3 panel members with us. My name is Anna Buverud. I'm from the University of Oslo in Norway. I have been given the chance to also present very briefly a project that we run together with the Scholars at Risk, the University of Ljubljana, and UNICA, the University Association for Capital Universities in Europe. The other 3, in a quick order here, is Alexandros Triantafyllidis. He's the head of Department of Genetics Development and Molecular Biology at, I forgot to write down the University of Aristotle University of Thessaloniki. He's also the coordinator, the scientific coordinator of the S.U.C.R.E program. Then it is Marija Mitic. She's from the Academic Cooperation Association, and she will present their new project GREET. That's in its starting phase, unlike the S.U.C.R.E project and then the InHERE project that Henriette Stoeber from the European University Association it has been coordinating with several other partners. These 2, S.U.C.R.E and InHERE, are in the more developed or finishing phases, isn't that so? There will also hopefully be time for some questions afterwards, but we'll take those in the end. We're already 10 minutes past when we were supposed to start. I hope you've had a great conference so far, by the way. Briefly, the Academic Refuge. This is one example of a European-funded program, a strategic program under the Erasmus Plus program. With the partners you can see on top is the University of Oslo, UNICA, University of Ljubljana, and Scholars at Risk Network. Our goals are both to improve the capacity of European universities to assist refugees, or I'd like to say students and scholars with a refugee experience, and to promote greater respect for the academic freedom and the protection for higher education values. So we try to combine 2 projects that we are working on in different ways into one bigger whole, having some sort of ideological umbrella over the practical work we do. At the University of Oslo, we started something 2.5 years ago called the Academic Dugnad for Refugees and Asylum Seekers, trying to help the students and scholars to continue their career paths in Norway. We cooperated very broadly with other Norwegian institutions, as well as other parts of the Norwegian public and social societies, the government, the different government officials. And we have narrowed down certain main challenges that we find are, we also cooperate obviously with institutions in other countries. And we defined some basic challenges that are trans-European, something that we're all striving with in different ways and with different consequences. I've just made a link there at the slide, which I'm sure you will get access to later, where you can read our report that came out last year that goes into more detail. The primary goals of the Academic Refuge, not Dugnad, but Refuge strategic partnership, is to develop a curriculum, to have some basic ideas that people can use to keep training and developing in their own universities or with their own partners. We are just about to launch a MOOC, and there will come an electronic handbook. So this is also a fairly new program. In June last year, we had a 1-week staff training week combining Scholars at Risk and offices working with Scholars at Risk and Scholars at Risk, together with people working with refugee measures. Quite a few of you are in this room today, and even more are in other parts of this conference. That's always a pleasure to meet again. We developed some new training materials. This is part of our curriculum building. We also had a chance to have a 1-day open conference at the same time, where, if you look over there, that's our then Minister of Education and Research, who was kind enough to visit Unfortunately, I didn't have time to go into the political discussion, but a few of our refugee students managed to get hold of him on the outside and delayed his new meeting for 15 minutes. So he didn't walk out scot-free. This is our MOOC, which will start on the 4th of June. It's possible to register now, so of course we hope that all of you will do so. Here's also the link to go in and register for it. And these are what we hope to achieve with the whole program in the long run, that we see the assisting scholars and students with a refugee background or who are living under threat as part of the main mission of the university, our own universities, other universities, and that we have a clear practice, and that we also practice in talking about these things when we meet our own academic staff, when we meet politicians or our students, that we have a language and a clear idea of why we're doing it. So thank you for your time, and I'll give the word to Alexandra Triantafyllidis.
Thank you.
You want this one?
Yeah, I think so. So, hello from me as well. It's a pleasure to be here and to discuss some results of our project S.U.C.R.E. So, our project is called Supporting University Community Pathways for Refugees Migrants. It's a strategic partnership project as well, which lasts for 2 years. The institutions involved in that is Aristotle University of Thessaloniki, and we are quite happy to be maybe one of the first Greek universities to be doing something coherently for the refugee problem. And we are collaborating with two very strong participant universities as well, the University of Cologne and the Vrije University of Amsterdam. We have also, they're all here, we have representatives here as well. And we're also working with the Greek Refugee Council Greek Council for Refugees. We worked together because when we were building the project was formed something like 2 years ago when there were thousands of refugees stranded on the borders of Greece trying to go north to Europe, but the borders were blocked. There were thousands of people in need, and Aristotle University is actually very close to those borders, so it was a specific need that something had to be done on that issue. This is why we designed a project which has 2 different main aims. One is very much linked to the problems of integrating, supporting refugee students, refugee scholars. This comprises of 3 work packages, deliverables. The first one, has to do with supporting refugee students as they try to be integrated into the universities. For this reason, the University of Cologne was responsible, coordinated this action. The main action was trying to build a handbook of good practices, trying to identify those challenges that refugee students meet and have as they try to enter the university. These are challenges which are personal, host-linked, and also interpersonal as well. These are challenges that, after the identification of those challenges through a wide questionnaire, which was sent to more than 120 universities around Europe, with a lot of interesting topics, and as well as with personal interviews with refugee students as well, we created a handbook, which is already available, which proposes a pathway for universities in order to be able to meet and to be able to answer those challenges and to give good practices for that. The second output has to do with the support of refugees refugee students after they enter the university. This is ongoing, so I don't have too much to say on that, but our focus here is again through dedicated analysis of their needs to be able to provide the handbook, and it should be ready very soon. The third one is the one which is mostly linked to the purpose of this excellent conference these days. It has been coordinated by the Vrije University of Amsterdam. There had been a specific session 2 days ago on this specific output, so I'm not going to focus too much on that. But again, through an analysis that has been done for more than a year now, through worldwide questionnaire on international universities, not only European universities, we see how refugee scholars should be supported and what is the importance of supporting not only their needs, but also their family needs as well. And we have to always stress that it's quite very important that it's a case-by-case scenario. So you cannot just generalize everything. And then we have a completely different approach. And this approach does not have to do only with the refugee student or refugee scholar population, but it has to do with the general refugee population. Don't forget that Greece was the main point of refugees arriving in European Union. There's a lot of people that have arrived, and a lot of people that need support. And they need support on a psychosocial basis. They need support on social integration. And that is why Aristotle University is preparing a digital material, open courses, which is directed to practitioners working with refugee general population. This is almost ready. It has to do and it deals with problems of space and time and how refugee people actually identify themselves through space and time as they are transient throughout European Union and as they're trying to find a place where they're going to be there at the end of their journey. And then another very important part of the support of refugee general population and the practitioners that work with them is the fact that we have to do at the legal status of refugees and also their medical needs. So we have already prepared an open course with all the material that's needed there. So this is a 2-year project. We're finishing in September 2017. I think, okay, oops, back. Okay, as regards most important things that have been happening so far for us during the course of this project is that we've been pressuring a lot the Greek Ministry of Education to take into consideration the problem of supporting refugee students and scholars and integrate them in higher education entities in Greece and others. We have done some very successful multiplier events in Cologne, September 2017, and also working with practitioners in Thessaloniki. We're here now, and we would like to welcome you to our multiplier events, which is going to happen in Amsterdam in July 2019. Our partners here have some more leaflets for information if you're interested to participate. And also, we're going to be having the last meeting in September 2019 in Thessaloniki, where we're also welcome. If you need more information, there is a specific Facebook site and a specific website of the project, so please feel free to ask for more information. Thank you very much.
Maybe I can just do it. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Marija Mitic, and I'm a policy officer at ACA, and as Anna already said, I will be presenting a project that really needs baby steps. So a project that's just started. So as a disclaimer, I don't have lessons learned and wisdom to share, but I do have our excitement and a lot of announcements to make, and I hope that this will encourage you also to take part in some of the activities, of course, should you be interested. So what I would like to start with actually is on a less formal note, and I would like to show you the faces. First of all, behind the project, as you can see, we just started because our kickoff meeting took place 2 weeks ago in Brussels. You see, this is our formal part meeting, and then this is the evening with some of the members of the advisory board. So who are these people? Who do they represent? The core consortium consists of ACA, that I represent today, of DAAD, and of EDUFI, the Finnish National Agency for Education. So they are the main partners. But we also have a very strong network, support network, which comprises our advisory board. So you can see we have scholars at RISC on the board. We have the IIE Scholar Rescue Fund. And we also have the VUB, the Free University of Brussels. And they are represented by Mohammed Salman, who is actually a Syrian scholar working at VUB and who initiated a very successful admissions program for students, for refugee students in Brussels. In addition, you will shortly hear about ACA, so we also have the support and endorsement of our members who are not directly involved as partners, but will be taking part in the activities of the project. Yes, so on this slide you can actually see the members of ACA, and I think this is very specific because we are not an association of universities, we are not an association of individuals. Our members have a very specific profile. They're national level organizations who in different capacities and forms support international cooperation in higher education. Some of them are Erasmus Plus agencies, some of them are scholarship granting bodies, but what is really a red thread for all of them is that they support international cooperation in higher education and that they support universities and higher education institutions in their countries. So we mainly have members from Europe, but we also have members from US, from Canada, Mexico. So our members, are considered to be the administrators. So they're not scholars, they're not professors, and in this, I think there's a very specific position that they have because most of them are the middlemen, the intermediaries between national governments and higher education institutions. So the roots, basically, of the GREET project were there. So when the so-called refugee crisis escalated in 2015, we got a very strong message from our members that they really wanted us to come together as an association and to see how they, as the national structure, can actually support higher educations in their country, higher education institutions in their countries. So as a relatively ad hoc response, the first thing we did was organize, and this is what we do amongst other things, we organized the European Policy Seminar, which was titled The International Refugee Crisis, What Role for European Higher Educations? And we brought together different stakeholders to discuss. We organized a followed up, basically, with an event for our members to take stock and see what was going on and what happened within a year. And we had continuous consultation with the members, and throughout these consultations, there was always there was a message that there's persistent need for more European level action, for more action that would be guided by a certain framework and a set of activities. So not biannual meetings or just discussing this, but something a bit bigger. And this is why when we learned about the Horizon 2020 call, which is how this project is funded, we thought that this would be actually an ideal opportunity for us to come up with a set of initiatives that would support the needs of our members and their constituency in their countries. So what we're trying to do with this project, what we will try to do in the next year and a half, which is a duration, we will try to provide peer learning opportunities for both national structures and higher education institutions, so basically bringing them together so they can have both in-country discussions, but they can also have exchange with their counterparts in other countries. We want to collect this cross-country knowledge that is really lacking and that is needed and disseminate it wider to the wider community, and also we hope to be able to inform and thus influence also national and EU policy making, because the ACA Secretariat, where actually I work, is based in Brussels, and we are trying, being in Brussels, to actually talk and have dialogue with the European Commission, with the EU officials, and convey the message. But also at the same time, we're working with national governments. So in that sense, we also see ourselves as a bridge builder between the two. The countries that are covered by the project, and I will explain shortly what I mean by this, are the ones that you see here, and the selection was made on the basis of the asylum applications and positive decisions, on the basis of the existing initiatives in the countries, and also on the basis of the political will in the countries. Because the call itself, the Horizon 2020 call, requested that the projects funded under this call should basically focus on what exists and try to bring it up to the European level. So what we will do in the next year and a half of the activities and outputs are here. So the first and the major activity will be a peer learning activity in September, the 24th and the 25th in Brussels, where, as I said, we will bring national structures and higher education institutions, around 30 participants from the 9 countries covered. This does not exclude the possibility that if you come from some of the countries not covered but are interested to take part, this is absolutely possible, but this is what the project budget can cover in terms of, it's like So if you can come at your own cost and be with us for 2 days, you're mostly welcome. Basically, the results of the PLA will feed into the webinars that we plan to then deliver. There will be 3 thematic Europe-wide webinars, and then some of the country-specific webinars, but the themes and the topics basically depend on what will be discussed at the peer learning activity. And the peer learning activity, the program, will be co-created with all the participants. We are now in this phase of actually discussing with our national counterparts who are inviting then universities from their countries, and we are together building a program based on the most pertinent issues. There will be, we hope, a big dissemination event in June 2019 in Brussels, where we then hope to bring policymakers together with the practitioners, so with universities, with also national agencies and similar bodies, networks that support the integration of students, refugee students and scholars. All the results then come together in an online, what we call an online compendium, but like a repository of practices, of the reports from the project, and also with a set of recommendations based on all the activities that will take place as part of the project. To conclude, I think what I find a specificity of the project is that, you know, we're not directly targeting or addressing refugee students and scholars, but we are actually working with support structures. So we are supporting support structures and those that are working with refugee students and scholars. And we are being in a position to be between the EU and the national policy making. We are trying to influence and put forward a set of recommendations. And what we very much hope for, and I've learned in these two and a half days that many colleagues who are running similar projects also agree with, is that we really need to come together, all of us who are running similar projects, and to really work together to build something more than we can do on our own, and to really be informed. So I invite all of you who are involved in similar projects to, you know, get in touch so that we can do more. Yeah, thank you.
I guess this way is fine now, yeah. Great. Okay, very quickly. Well, I'm from one of those projects that is actually about to end, the InHERE project, Higher Education Supporting Refugees in Europe. It is also a Key Action 2 project funded by the European Commission. And just to give you a couple of background information, we always start with this slide, but you heard it from my colleague Monica this morning, the European University Association, representing universities in these countries that are covered in different shades of blue here, in order to represent them towards the policy levels, but also in order to bring them together on topics that are important to them in projects, events, and so on. And I can say with great confidence that our universities are very interested in and committed in supporting refugees, and I based this statement on our Refugees Welcome Map. I'm sure you heard me say this at several events, I'm sorry, but I would still like you to invite you to participate. It is still possible to submit your initiatives there. What we did since 2015 with this mapping is basically try to get a grasp of what universities are doing in order to welcome refugees. It runs over a small survey, and I won't say much more. I will share the link at the end of my presentation. But perhaps just one key point here is that if you locate one of these initiatives on the map, which can be a university, but also student union, recognition agencies, and so on, in most of the cases, we have the direct contact details of the person in charge at the institution. And so please do feel free to drop them a line, to ask them how they deal with specific challenges, perhaps in the same region, the same country, or look for the next Erasmus Plus project collaboration, right? Okay. Now, as you can see on this little circular motion, on this slide, the map kind of was feeding into the InHERE project and vice versa. The aims were quite similar. Both with the map and the InHERE project, we wanted to share the commitment of the sector, but we also wanted to inspire other institutions to follow suit in welcoming refugees on their campuses and in their society. You can see here the list of outputs. We're basically almost through with them. We also started with a good practice catalog, some training activities. Last week we had a fantastic staff training week at Sapienza University, and we will have a policy dialogue event with recommendations back-to-back with the IHEA Ministerial Conference in Paris, which is hosted by Campus France. Sorry, the date is actually wrong. It's 22nd of May, and registrations for this one are still open. We have like 5 more places left, so in case you're interested to come, please just go on the InHERE website or Campus France. And the final event is also in September 2019. And as just my colleague from ACA said, and we already discussed this, you know, both of our organizations were, for instance, involved in a midterm review of the Erasmus Plus program. You know, we asked our respective members what can be made better. And one of our main recommendations in EOA's recommendations was indeed due to the decentralized nature of the Erasmus Plus program under Key Action 2, which are basically selecting projects on the national level, we find out at events and we sit on panels and all of a sudden, oops, there's a project that actually has a similar mission. I mean, we're working towards a similar goal. Of course, different angles, different countries as well covered, but in the end of the day, over the formal Erasmus Plus structures, we never really get to talk to each other. So we're actually hijacking our final event, and instead of talking about our project all day long, we want to do a clustering event of Erasmus Plus projects, and then also with a view towards the projects that are just starting, such as the GREET, to bring them together and perhaps have some more synergies between them in the future. Right. The Good Practice Catalog. Yes, this was our first activity. I'm not going to tell you about all the fantastic initiatives that are in there. They are, of course, online. You can see these little violet buttons. They're the different topics. You know, there's integration, there's funding for refugees, there's employment opportunities for scholars and researchers. But instead, I wanted to tell you about how we selected these. This is also kind of the main, one of the main philosophies behind this project, and this is also what EOA plans to take forward in other activities. Quality over quantity, of course, we didn't look for initiatives that have the largest number of refugees enrolled or the largest number of researchers and scholars at risk at their university, but we were looking for an evidence-based projects and initiatives that are really focusing on the needs and expectations into higher education of the refugees that come to their institutions, that were developed in collaboration. Of course, we as an organization always like to see when universities get together, but even more so collaboration with municipalities, local NGOs, you know, training first contact points of the refugees in explaining the opportunities in the higher education system and so on. Practice tested, well, we heard this many times from all sorts of universities. They didn't want to reinvent the wheel, and we absolutely agree with this. We actually found, especially also with the view of sustainability, that when initiatives were building up on products or services of the universities that target, for instance, international students or other types of disadvantaged learners, that they then also, you know, could be upscaled and be sustainable in a longer-term fashion. Long-term sustainability also, I'd like to say, on the map at the moment we have like 330 initiatives, and a lot of them focus on bringing refugees into higher education, but not so many actually, you know, strategize around what happens afterwards. So in terms of retention, in terms of study success, and there again, not to reinvent the wheel, because universities do have services for all sorts of learners to get through studies and be successful. Right. My last point here, and perhaps the most important one, is we try to identify initiatives for refugee students and researchers that were specifically linked to the third mission of a higher education institution. And to be honest, there is not so many out there. As a matter of fact, actually, a lot of the initiatives start by motivated staff and students, and these are fantastic and very important. But, you know, coming back just to the point of sustainability, we see it if there is a link to the mission, if perhaps there is a broader strategy for diversity management that covers refugees as one of the target groups to be included into higher education, these initiatives can be also more successful in the long run. And here I just listed a couple of areas that that, you know, we would say overarching diversity management in the sense of refugee inclusion should actually cover, so for instance, outreach, you know, information sharing, advocacy also with your municipalities and your governments, research, research on the local refugee population, and with it, community-based research projects and these things. Teaching is something that is not so embedded in the activities at the moment. So for instance, giving students credit points for, you know, within their program, do legal labs or do language training if they're teacher training students. And then of course, all sorts of services. I know, Anna. 2 more sentences. Sorry. Right, and I will be really brief. This is just a nice photo I wanted to share from wonderful Sapienza University last week. You can see I got a little bit of a tan. It was very good, but very exhausting too. In one of the activities, we made participants come up with a very short message to governments and policymakers, and I'm not going to read through it. I just want to underline the main messages here. So these different representatives from 19 countries underlined actually the potential gain. We want to see a change in language. We don't want to talk about refugee crisis anymore. We don't actually want to talk about refugees anymore. We're talking about international talent. And this is a change in language that we also would like to see on the policy level and in society overall. So our participants underlined the potential gain for university, the third mission links, and so on and so forth. And I guess we can discuss about this later on as well. Right, here's all the links, and thank you very much.
So thank you, all 3 of you. You were touching upon this in your presentation, Henriette. There are many similarities in our projects, in what we are doing. What is the next step? And it's free for all of you to answer. How do we go from here, from doing great and exciting things in regions or with certain partnerships? How do we move it onto the general European level?
Is it on? Yes. Well, I have a very concrete example, actually. That's the result of the S.U.C.R.E Congress with a colleague. Well, actually, it is, there will be, so we were discussing, actually, this problem that A, we don't know so much, B, you know, it's sometimes also very difficult to learn from well, the European Commission, because we are now under the Horizon 2020 funding, so this is a decentralized funding. So it's very difficult to learn, actually, even about the project. So I happened to meet a colleague from UNICA, and also I talked to Marit, and we were discussing, since there will be an event of your project in June in Brussels 2019, so a concrete step would be to organize something together. And I think one step at a time, you know, when it happens, then we start working together, and then we get new ideas, and from there it goes on. But I think it's very important to already really discuss very concrete steps. So we will also have the meeting that the EUA will be organizing, and I think this is how we can at least start working together on this and building synergies.
Yes, I guess, I mean, I already covered that aspect about synergies before. I mean, in Erasmus Plus, it's the specific problem of the decentralization, but nowadays there's actually different funding sources for integration of refugees into education. There's the AMI Fund, Horizon 2020 does something, and I'm sure there's something else on the European level that I'm not even aware of. When you talk to different Directorate General representatives, I mean, from different Directorate Generals, you know, the mission and the goal is always the same. And actually, if they're not from DG Education and Research, they are very convinced that the Erasmus Plus program should be doing a lot for refugees in terms of scholarships and funds. It's a little bit more different with those that are actually in charge. So for us, yes, synergies is a big step, and we hope that you know, with the networking event that we're trying to establish, this is just the first step, and this will be more embedded in future projects. But also also in terms of how to bring it to the European level, all these events always are supposed to have a policy dimension. And in the end of the day, it would be very important that these messages really build upon each other. You know, there's development in the different European countries, good practices also on the policy level in terms of what is being funded and done and changed in legislation. So it is really about just bringing it all together instead of working separately, I think.
I definitely agree with what has been said. If I may just extend only the last point that Henriette said, it's very, very important that we work on local policy making as well. That's why, apart from working in Brussels with a higher level, top DG secretariats and everything, one of the main points, at least within our project, was to try to discuss with the local government, because it's a big problem to disseminate with them and with the end users of what we're doing, that we should do that as well and work on that level as well. So working at the local government as well in order to be able to have a bigger impact. Synergy is first, and then also at the same time, yeah.
I've got my microphone. Knowing what you already know, where do you think the biggest gaps are? What are the biggest challenges that are still unresolved when it comes to integrating students and scholars with a refugee education?
I'll start, if I can, and say, first of all, we have to understand that there is a big gap as regards the different levels of preparation of Southern and Northern Europe. In Northern Europe and Central Europe, there were a lot of structures already as regards welcoming migrant students or migrant asylum-seeking scholars. In Southern European universities, Italy, Spain, Greece, there is no legislation whatsoever as regards supporting of such students. So we have to press more as regards how to build the structures. That's why, for instance, for our project, it was very important that within these issues, it was mostly University of Cologne and Vrije University of Amsterdam were the leading partners that could give us the know-how as regards how to do that. Okay. So that's one point we have to remember as well.
I can just build on that, because whether we talk about the north-south or east-west axis, I think we are also seeing this. Like, first of all, a big disbalance also in the support or the political will. This is one thing, but also in the numbers of refugees. And we have members in Central Europe as well, some of whom were willing to engage, but simply they felt that they would not be able to contribute much. But also we have members in the countries where this was absolutely a no. And it was not even questioned, whether they would be engaged or not, despite what personal staff members think or not. So in our case, I personally really feel sorry. We are focusing on countries where there's already something going on. But at the same time, it's also a political question, So for us, really, we are a European association, but working with national governments, we really see this discrepancy. And I think for us, this is the biggest challenge, how to get involved more of our members who simply cannot take part.
Right, yes, I agree with all these points, and perhaps I focus my view more on the university view, even though we are, of course, not a university ourselves. But over the last 3 years, in terms of gap and challenges, one topic that really doesn't go away is recognition. I don't know why, and there's so many projects, and yes, it is very difficult, but this seems to be a very persistent gap with recognition. Of course, recognition of prior learning and of degrees of refugee students and scholars. You perhaps know that this is supposed to be based on the Lisbon Recognition Convention, a convention that all the countries, well, except Greece actually, in the European higher education area have signed, meaning that they are supposed to set up national structures, recognition agencies, that also supposedly are to have something in place in order to recognize for refugees, even in the absence of documentation. Now, this is if you would go the national route, but of course most of Europe's universities are autonomous enough to make recognition decisions for access to their own programs themselves. But even those cases, it is difficult. They struggle with the sheer amount of papers coming towards them. There is not so much support as there perhaps could be in collaboration with the InHERE, with the recognition agencies, that is. And we are actually working towards the goal and are doing project with NOKUT, the Norwegian agency, and also the Greek agency, and CIMEA, the Italians now. They already have a toolkit developed between the recognition agencies for refugees without papers, and we're now trying to bring this into the university level perspective as of next June. And if I just may re-emphasize, the gap is also funding. I don't think this is a major, well, it is a major issue in most countries, perhaps not so much in Germany, where there was a lot of funding made available from the ministry, but other countries really struggle. And if there's funding, the problem is also that it's usually project-based. So we're talking 2-3 years, we're talking peer learning and collaboration projects, but it's actually not funding where universities can really set up, you know, a structure at the university, or perhaps give a couple of other scholarships to specific refugee students as well.
If I may just add to this funding, but also I think, especially when we talk about Erasmus+, the feedback that we received from our members is also that they would need more flexibility. So, you know, that simply to be able to reallocate certain funds. So if they have some funds unused, to be able then to give these funds to projects. Yes, it is project-based, but still I think any kind of initiative is still good. So to simply allocate these funds to the needed initiatives. And some of them are actually focusing on refugee students and scholars. I think the Commission is somehow trying gradually to move in this direction. So for example, the call that we applied under at the time, the total budget was 1 million. And then apparently the Commissioner insisted that it be doubled. So now for the second call in 2018, it was 2 million. Let us be hopeful that this will, the trend will continue. But I think it's still a relatively positive sign.
I think, does any of you have any questions to the panelists? Would you take the microphone? And you were taking the microphone, that's how it was. There's at least one lady in the middle there.
Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Fatima Ayroudi. I'm working currently at the refugee program here at Freie Universität. And thank you very much for your presentations of the different projects. And I was wondering if you have any numbers of refugees actually having access to university, especially in Greece, where most of them arrive, or Italy. So yeah, that would be my first question. And the second was I know that there are many problems facing funding and accommodations, but are there any other problems facing the access directly to university in Greece somehow? Because in Germany it would be the German language, of course, and the funding, but are there any other problems they are facing there?
If I may say so, it's exactly what I said in the first place, that there was no infrastructure, no legislation as regards how to integrate refugee students in Greek universities. That's why, for instance, many other countries, it was a fact that there is some ways that refugee students can enter universities, even at least to be prepared to enter the universities. In Greece, there is no legislation. There is actually there is no refugee student right now who is admitted in a Greek university. I don't know about Italian universities, maybe through, I think there is some, there are some, yeah, already. So this is what we're working on right now, just identifying the problem, working with the General Secretariat of the Ministry of Education right now, and pressuring more and more that something should be done on that. So that's what we're trying to do. As regards, if we have the legislation, if there is some kind of funding, because the national agency is also pressing the Ministry of Education, there has to be some funds on that direction for refugee students and hopefully for refugee scholars. It's very important that we're here today as well in this conference. Then I think then it's going to go very fast after that, because as Greek universities, we have a long experience of having Erasmus students coming to our university. So we know a lot of how to approach students. Of course, the needs of refugees and the trauma that they carry is more difficult sometimes to support, but we do have the know-how as regards foreign university students in supporting them.
If I might add to the access question, I think it's very important to address how many people do we actually help with all these efforts that we put in place. And one of the main challenges that I've seen in my work is that we are still so far away from that beautiful Bologna future in Europe, where you easily move from one institution to another. So all in all, we are very much where we were. There are differences in the different countries. We have bridging courses in place. We have language courses in place. But getting, especially the language, getting language training that is actually good enough to help people continue studying in the new country in the languages that are required is still a main issue that comes before all the other recognition of past studies and everything. And also, I would like to mention one of my pet points is just the need of proper English education for these students, because especially students coming from the Middle East often have little experience in using English as a language of tuition, whereas very many of the universities use a lot of English. So unless one remembers to have adequate English language training available in addition to the local language, it's going to be very hard for many of these students to actually succeed, even if they are admitted. And for us, anyway, it's been a very important point that we don't, these are very resourceful people that have managed to actually come to Europe, and certainly to Northern Europe. So we have to make sure that we are helping them to get to that level where they can really use all their competences and become the scholars that they were meant to be or already were in the process of becoming. So, more you have?
If I could just make a small addition on the numbers, yeah.
Yeah.
There is actually not so much data available on how many students are enrolled. Of course, some universities specifically say this in their programs if you check them out over the map, for instance. But you know, this is actually a difficult point when we ask for more funding from governments and the Commission. Now, it's been a couple of years, but are there actually refugees who want to study at the universities? I mean, this is, you know, I'm übertreiben, I'm doing it. You know, but the thing is, let's not forget these admission requirements. You know, how long does it take to get German B2 level, or Norwegian? Is it even C1 level plus English? You know, but our colleagues at UNESCO in September will publish a report, hopefully covering most of the European countries. And they're really trying to get the numbers together on enrollment, but also enrollment in the bridging program. So we're really looking forward to that. And I'm sure that in the bridging and language courses, the numbers are very, very large. But let's just be patient and let's see a couple of more years and hope that the policy level also still is interested.
Important. Any other questions? Then I'll ask one last one. Oh, it was on, up on top there.
Just to about, you were asking about figures, and my colleague from the Freie Universität, you might know, but maybe it's interesting for the other ones. So in Germany we have an important panel called the Socio-Economic Panel, and there has been a special exercise on refugees. The results have been published, and there it says, if this is the situation for Germany, if you look at the refugees from all over the world who have come to Germany, and the figures were, the people were asked in 2015 and 16, so these are the latest figures, it says that 35% of the adults that have come to Germany as refugees have a secondary certificate, a secondary school certificate, which enables them to study in their home country. Of course, the question is of how well it is recognized in Germany. If you go a little bit further, 16% of the adults from all over the world that have come to Germany as refugees had done some university studies in their home country already. 11% of all the adults already had at least one university certificate, so at least a bachelor degree in their pocket. So what I would like to say is the number, at least for Germany, they are relevant. There is a potential, and that should be used. I mean, and it's not only for the sake of the refugees, but a country that is facing aging society like Germany, it may also be of use for the host country of those refugees. So this is just to answer your questions on figures. But of course, the origins of refugees change, the paths they are taking, the countries of origin are changing, so the numbers may change, of course, as well in the future. Thanks.
I would like to ask you very briefly, I mean, we all have partners, I think, in this room, but I'm sure there are people here also who've been considering applying for funding to start a project. So to each of you, very briefly, what would be your main advice for people wanting to start up something like that?
Use the map. I'm sorry. I mean, this is basically one of the major ideas behind why we did this and why we collect contact details of people. We don't want to spam them, but if you click on the universities, in most of the cases you have even a phone number of the person. So, you know, you can see exactly what universities are doing and how you perhaps could fit together in a project. I think, yeah, that's my advice.
Well, I can just share our experience and how and why we did it, because as I said, I mean, we in ACA, well, in the Secretariat in Europe, you know, so we have really a bird's view. But what we based our proposal on was really on the needs that were identified through discussions with their members, and you know, they know the national landscape and what they're dealing with. So we really made sure that what we are addressing is what should be addressed. And we had the right knowledgeable team to do that, and also support from the networks that are with us.
And I would add also, first of all, it's very important the complementarity of the partners. Be very careful about your ideas and be very precise about that. But on a technical side, pay really big attention to the call and try to answer that being very, very important. It's always very important, the impact and the follow-up of the project. How do you actually plan to work on that project in the long run? So if it's one thing that we had as a main point to look into from our national agency was always, what are you going to do about the dissemination of the impact of the project? This has to be very clear when you submit the proposal as well, that you have a good plan about that. So if you want to be funded, you have to be very careful on that side as well.
Can I add, I'm sorry, I was just inspired by what you said. Pay attention to the call. We have an anecdote from our experience with the Horizon 2020. When the call was published, one of the requirements was the call will support the initiatives that have been running for at least 2 years. So no new initiatives, but something that's been running for 2 years. So we thought, okay, I mean, with all due respect to all our members, but we thought if DAD does not have something that's been running for 2 years, what do? We're in trouble. So we thought, and then we said, okay, so there is the Integra program we want to focus on. It's not been running for 2 years, but almost. And we have the Finnish example that's also been running since 2013, but all our other members who were interested, they opted out, saying, we don't want to put you in danger because we're not sure we're eligible. Mm-hmm. So we decided to do it, and then when we met the colleagues from the Commission, what they told us, oh no, but this was not an eligibility criterion. We just wanted to emphasize what we would like to see in the proposals. So, you know, I'm sure that many, many organizations did not apply simply because they thought, oh no, we're not eligible, this is it. So, you know, justify very well what you're doing, even if it's not completely in line with the call, but you know what you're doing. So just show you know what you, well, okay. In this case.
Commission talk can be very great.
But you see what happened, yeah. Okay.
I would like to thank you all for coming here. I hope you brought some new ideas with you back home. I would like to emphasize something that was also mentioned earlier. More than anything, these people represent talent and possibilities for our institution. They also represent talent and possibility for the whole Bologna process. They're actually giving us an extra push towards solving those problems we've been striving with for the last 30 years. And finally, just keep in mind those 99% of the world's refugees who don't have access to higher education. We need to start thinking about those in the end too. Thank you for coming.